Sound? Oh, there is. All right. Welcome to my talk about how to get people to act on good ideas and not get stuck doing whatever they are used to doing. It's about being a change agent in your own organization, which usually is very hard. Fact is that many people aren't that interested in making changes. You and me and people gathered here are interested in always evolving and finding better ways. And we have to find ways to convince all these people that are not so open to change to act on our good ideas. I have gathered inspiration from this book written in 2010, and I've tried to create my version after having worked in this business for nearly 20 years. Now, this is me, jovial guy, 43 years old, with a wife and 2 kids. I finished my master's degree in 2000, but I started working as a sysadmin at the university back in 1998. From 2004 and onwards, I worked mainly as a programmer, and that's when I discovered Agile. I became the first certified Scrum Master in Norway, together with a few other people, and we fought many battles at that time. And we did actually mostly succeed. Thing is that it took a long time, but we finally got there with a little help from the rest of the world, also getting interested in these changes. When I started in Bekk in 2010, I discovered this thing called DevOps. And getting organizations to adopt the DevOps way of thinking, that has been my main concern since that. I started, as Stein Inge said, the DevOps meetup in 2012, and that community has grown actually to 1,500 people. I thought at that time that we would be like 10 guys or something sitting in a cafe discussing these new ideas, but it's quite amazing. And throughout the years, I've had very strong opinions in many areas, and I've learned a lot about how to get people to act on good ideas during my 20 years. So I'll try to share with you some of the things I've learned and what I've seen work for me. I am certain that all of you have experienced to not be heard, that people don't understand, that nothing that you're suggesting is taken into account, that the organization is heavy, rigid, that you don't have any mandate, that decisions come from above. No matter how much you scream, you can't be heard. And I felt all these things. But thing is, you can't blame all those surrounding things. You have to look up, and you have to do something about it. So even if it seems hopeless, there's always possible to change things. I have been on greenfield projects, I've been on legacy projects, and there's no difference. Same with the size of the organization, there's always room for pushing limits and making change. So first thing you have to do is don't complain, don't give up, and just be awesome. You're guaranteed to make change if you just try. But why is it so hard to get people to change? If you're not in management, if you're surrounded with people who are satisfied with the way things are, those are probably the worst. If people are stuck in the past, or frankly, they're just against anything and everything. And to understand more about why people aren't acting on good ideas, we'll look at some stereotypical skeptics that I have met, and most of you probably have met in some context or another. That's my cat, by the way, always skeptical. So let's start with the first one. Let's start with the argumentative. The argumentative, he is a guy that comes with as many objections as he can in the hope that all objections create so much doubt about your suggestion that it falls. The strange thing is that the argumentative, he might not disagree with you even, but he likes to argue for the sake of arguing. If he succeeds in destroying a suggestion, any suggestions, he'll be satisfied. And the result is often that nothing is done, that it has only contributed to doubt in the whole group. The worst thing is that the argumentative is often seen as the expert. He may not be smart, but he appears to be smart because he has so many objections. That's why he does it, to look smart. And being argumentative is much easier than being the one who presents something. If someone argumentative would stand up now and object to what I'm saying, it will be much harder for me to counter that attack, because I'm nervous. So I've gathered a few techniques that I've seen work for me. One thing is prepare well, always prepare well. So try to figure out what will the argumentative typically argue about. Another thing that you can do is like turn it around and make them not smart by asking them difficult questions. That's not actually always easy, because they're good at arguing. And if you don't master that same skill that they have, it can be really hard. Another technique is you can use post-its to get all angles and then rank them in relation to what is the most important or most valuable. And then often the arguments of the argumentative will not be so important or valuable or just simply lame. You see it on paper. And the best thing I've found to work is just to ask the group, can we just try? Give it a week, make a POC, and then we see if the objections from the argumentative is something or if it actually works. Let's start with go to the experienced. There's nothing wrong in being experienced. Nevertheless, when I remember back to when I was young and promising, I hated experienced people. I have therefore often wondered whether I am such a douche myself, simply because I've been working for a long time. The problem with the experienced is that they have been out on a winter night before, and when new ideas emerge, they have participated in something that is similar before, because we are keeping reinventing the wheel all the time. Experienced people that I met at the beginning of my career were, for example, those who participated in many deployments that went to hell. So they meant that it should be done as seldom as possible. You've probably experienced that too. And that long test phases were the only way to ensure quality. It was really hard to argue for frequent releases and TDD when you had all these experienced people having experienced all that stuff going on when big releases fail. Or you have the experienced who was in the pocket of large enterprise shelf suppliers who had these fantastic deals where they had like premium support, so they felt safe. And that made it really hard to convince about open source. Personally, I've participated in a project to remove all JavaScript from web applications and replace it with Java server faces. And the worst thing is that was actually the right thing to do at that time, because JavaScript was spaghetti. And then I was burned with JavaScript. And what happens when JavaScript appears? Again, skeptical. Experienced people have natural authority, and they have tried similar things before, and therefore often become a showstopper, because people listen to them. They have knowledge because they've been past it before. What you have to play on the above experience is to show them how things work and why it is a good choice. Talking their ears full of buzzwords, that simply doesn't work. Show, not tell is the thing with the experienced. For experienced people, after all, they have experience, and they often know what's good and what's bad when they see it with their own eyes. And they're a bit like bosses. If you show that you're brilliant time after time, you will get full confidence from them. My favorite, the unexperienced. He's usually anything but a skeptic. So he doesn't really fit in this line of skeptics. But he can be a little tricky too. Some of the people that I've met have been quite world champions without having done anything in the real world yet. They hate the experienced, like I did, before he even opens the jaw. And when you have never been burned before, you can play a little bit too much with fire. And then one has to learn such things as what we're dealing with is something that is bigger than the technical things that we're working on. After all, we must solve business needs. But most of the newcomers, they are full of courage and are eager to learn, but they have to be taken care of right from the start. They may not know how much you can challenge other people. They can be unsure of their own skills, and they have not experienced massive IT trouble before, and therefore they may not have a good concept of risk. The best thing you can do is to pair them up with more experienced people. It's a win-win for both the newcomer and the experienced, because the newcomer will actually produce stuff, and the experienced will learn new stuff. Disciples. Disciples are, unfortunately, all too common in our industry. Disciples are those who never say no, and if they're asked, why did you do it like that? Then they say, because I was told to do it that way. They don't ask questions about what they are told to do, and they have chosen to be code monkeys themselves and type in whatever the architects tell them to type in on their keyboards. There are people that are waiting for the architectural council to complete their report on what standards developers should follow before they do anything. They are waiting for someone else to decide how to do the job before they do it themselves. So, best thing you can do is to convince the disciples that experimenting and ensuring progress without permission is good. That the customer does not know his own best, and that those who are closest to the technical stuff are in a better position to make technical choices than the architects who have ceased to program many years ago. The problem is that you often don't get the disciples to become experimental. Therefore, you must make them perform your experiments. What's nice then is that they've become your disciples and not someone else. And they're all good because they don't need to take the blame. You have to take the blame. The lazy. The lazy does exactly what is needed without getting fired, and he cares nothing about the craft. They do not read blogs or books on spare time, and conferences are something they go to get time off. I hope none of you are those people. Well, I know you're not. So it doesn't work to take a serious talk and ask them to pull themselves together. Then they may say, yes, I'll pull myself together, but it's not going to happen. You simply have to sit down with them and demonstrate what you want them to do and make sure to tell them why and not just how. That makes them a little bit better, and you at least you limit the damage. And they're not the best people to have on the team, but after all, some work will be done, and you have told them why and how to do it. The irrational. He is the toughest. You can convince the experienced to try something that they've had bad experience with before in a new way. And the disciples, you can make them do things for you and not for others, but not with the irrational. There are many reasons why someone is irrational. There's thousands of reasons, but some of them are that they may be a fanboy of some product that they're convinced will solve all their problems and don't listen to anything else and what the vendor tells them. They can be so stressed with stuff that they are struggling with and refuse to have one more thing on their plate. So they should actually stay away, but they involve themselves, yet they don't have time for it. And it can be that they simply can't stand you. It could be anything. I can't find any good pattern for the irrational, but I've met them many times. The challenge is that the irrational will use all means to ruin positive change. They'll play the role of different skeptics. They will be contradictory to things they have said before. They usually have an underlying cause, but it rarely bubbles off. And if it becomes known what the cause really is, then it will be even worse. They have been revealed, but they would refuse to admit it. And there's, in my opinion, no point in wasting time trying to convince these people. You cannot sell anything to them. You must conduct damage control and try to prevent them from participating at all. This may seem harsh, but I actually mean it. The best thing is to ignore them completely. Do not spend time on them. Focus on other people instead. But it is very easy to make mistakes about people. So be careful and never give up on people. It's also possible to change, but unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often. But anyway, do not tell people what kind of skeptic they are, and be nice to everyone, always. Also the irrational. Maybe especially the irrational. Let's have a look at some techniques that I found that worked well for me. As I said, the most meaningless you can do is to spend time on the irrational. That won't succeed in any way. You waste valuable time that you can spend on other people who are easier to turn or get to work for you. Problem is that they take so much space that you cannot completely avoid them. It's impossible to avoid them. However, the tip is to do as little as possible in relation to the irrational. Let them just steer on with whatever they're doing. Answer dry and short, both verbally and in emails. Don't express opinions. And by all means, don't get mad. Even if you are their enemy, don't make them your enemy. Focus instead on other people. If they go too far and harass you or someone else, then you have to do something about it. Of course, that's always unacceptable. So get help if you can't manage to do something about that yourself. Focus on the like-minded is a much better idea. If you're going to create change, you cannot stand alone. If you have people around you who think the same way as you do, and that have ideas that you like, then you have to harness that. Create enthusiasm about what you want to achieve in as many as possible of those who think like you. The more enthusiastic they get about new ideas, the easier it is to get things done. Create a park, invite someone to join a meetup, show off your stuff, and be interested in other people's stuff. Present something with someone else at a conference. Achieving goals with others is a wonderful thing. It's very hard to reach a goal all by yourself. If you manage to get people to share the same goals as you, chance is much bigger that everyone will succeed. And large goals have many steps and activities that you do not know beforehand. So then you need a group of people who all understand the goal and then handle all these obstacles that appear along the way. That's agile, right? And this picture is from the day that we got root in production at my previous customer. And I promise you that that road was very long and it was paved with many small steps along the way. Without the effort from everyone on this team, it would not have been possible. But although it was great to achieve this goal, then it was nothing but a small step for a higher purpose. For getting access to prod, that does not make things better. It usually makes things worse. But now we could start working towards bigger goals, which of course was not to be like gods of production. Programmers have programming problems, and managers have manager problems. It's important to understand that. Therefore, programming problems must be solved as leader problem solutions. Reducing technical debt can be translated into reducing production errors and faster development of new features. Automation can be translated to spending more time working on things that create value for the business. If you can explain that what you're trying to accomplish actually resolves management problems, then you have a good chance that you get what you want. And another very useful by-effect from this is that you can get executives to promote your solutions to other parts of the organization, thus helping transform the entire organization. As you all know, leaders do have power. And then you must understand that the organization you work for exists for a reason. Understand why it exists, and adapt your suggestions to fit what the organization really is in business for. Managers, they are always busy, and if you manage to make their job easier and remove concerns from their to-do list, you are very convincing. Do not include the managers themselves in the tasks that you're trying to solve, but show that you can solve a problem they have without them having to spend a lot of time on it, because they're busy. If you succeed, don't take the credit yourself. Give the credit to them for letting them give you the opportunity to try. And then you achieve trust. Show, not tell. There's nothing like valuable working software. It's much easier to convince someone if you can show something instead of explaining things with words. And you've learned a lot more about how things work when you've made something concrete. You've already shown that it can be solved, and risk-averse skeptics, they will calm down. And create something awesome. For something to be considered awesome, it's not necessarily hard. It's about adding just a small touch to what you create to show off a script that automates deployment. May be cool for some people. They might get impressed. But connecting a button to the USB port and having the CEO deploy the next version of your application to prod, that is awesome. Don't listen to your mother. This is definitely my most used technique. If you make awesome before someone has objections, you usually always get away with it. Get things in public cloud before anyone has managed to say VMware. In our industry, you do not have the time to wait for people to agree or decide something. Secondly, it's probably just you who knows what's going on. Do not wait for people who are not as close to the problem as you are to make decisions. Praise the customer, not yourself. Even better, get the customer to boast about his achievement on a conference or on a blog or whatever. Show victory both internally and externally. It adds lots of internal pride and motivation to continuing to be awesome. And it helps spread the happy message to larger parts of the organization and the entire industry. This is also a useful technique that actually works, because it's hard to be a prophet in your own country. For some reason, people don't think that what comes from their own organization is greatness. But if you get someone from the outside to convey your message, then people will listen. It's a little bit like in my marriage. When I say something a little bit controversial or incredible to my wife, for example, that cow fart is a larger environmental threat than emissions from cars and aircrafts, and she doesn't believe it. But when we sit in a dinner party, and then someone else says it, then it's like, whoa, is that true? Wow, I didn't know that. A colleague of mine, Stefan, he has really opened my eyes for this technique. Even if people are working across town or in a different country, go visit them. It's extremely effective for 2 reasons. Number 1, you can sit on top of people until they do what you want them to do. And 2, you get to know people. It's amazing how much easier it is to pick up the phone directly and actually call the person that you know on the other end, and then make them do things for you. Be visible, internally and externally. Contribute to open source, blog, or talk at a conference. Share. Then you automatically become the expert, and you become the guy to go to for advice on how to fix problems. What we do outside of work is really, really important. I'm going to wrap up with some small comments that I've learned. Things take time. So do not focus on winning all the wars at once. But sometimes you don't have much time. For example, shifting to public cloud before the architectural council lands that they want to go for private cloud. You have to move fast. But many things are such that you have to let people mature, the whole organization to mature. So you must seed your ideas and use all the techniques that I've mentioned over time. If you want to be a mean, lean machine that spits out high-quality software many times a day, has full autonomy and mandate to do as you please, then there are many small steps towards that goal. So do not think short-term. Small wins are not so valuable, even though it's cool to gain access to production or switch programming language to something that is much better suited for the problem that you are solving. You should have more long-term goals, where you end up in a position where you can make all the decisions, earn the trust, without having to spend a lot of time convincing. Success, unfortunately, happens in a silo. If you succeed in the team that you are on, it does not mean that the entire organization has changed. It's cool to be in a really good team that does everything right, but it's important to spread success. That's when we really can challenge a whole industry and make our customers winners. And remember, you may be wrong. Everyone can be wrong. But it's better to make some mistakes than to not try at all. Get allies and talk to like-minded people, then the risk of being wrong is much smaller. And most importantly, better is not a place, it's a direction. So never be completely satisfied once you've reached a goal. You should already have thought about the next goal for a long time ago. Thank you.